Good afternoon, David. How are you?
I'm good, Taya. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you so much for joining me in this initiative to interview our past presidents to gain some insight into the things that have shaped us as an organization, what things you have done that has shaped the organization, and then what your insights are into how we can continue to shape the legal profession moving forward. So, with that, I have 5 questions. And let me start off with my first, which is what one word would describe the impact the association has had on the legal profession and the broader New York community throughout its 150-year history?
One word is tough, but I'm going to say the one word I would choose is potential. Uh, when you're a leader of the association, you get to see and you take great pride in all the many great things that the association does. But you also, I think, have a close-up look at the potential of how much more we can do. And as a leader, a good leader, I think understands that this association can do anything, but we can't do everything.
Right.
And when we spend time and resources on things that are away from our core values, it detracts from the things that we can really be helpful and productive in. So we do a lot of great things, but I'm going to say the the word I'm going to use for the association is potential.
Right. So now let's move on to talk about perhaps how that potential has been realized. So, what are the two most significant milestones in the association's history?
Well, and I'm going to skip over our formation. I mean, we're about to celebrate our 150th anniversary. I'll skip over, 1876 when we were formed. The two things to me that I think define our association, one is in 1969, the purchase of One Elk Street. I think it was a defining moment in our association. It enabled our association, I think, to be considered a professional association that's involved in the community rather than just a trade association. I mean, the ability to have members come in here and use the facility, to have members of the court system and the legal community to consider the Bar Association and the Bar Center at One Elk to be a home, I think elevates the association to the appropriate greatness that it deserves. And you said two, the second.
Yes, the second one.
The second thing was around the same time, 1972, was when the association created the House of Delegates. I think was an important moment in the association's history, and I think really shapes everything we've done over the last 50 years. Up until that point, we had an executive committee that was, I think, anywhere from 50 to 70 people. And they decided, our leaders at the time changed the bylaws to create this House of Delegates, which included representatives from throughout every county and major bar association throughout the state. And there was great debate over whether having leaders from other bar associations be in our House of Delegates, our policymaking and governing body, whether that would be a good idea. And that was debated in the early 70s and eventually passed. And I think it was virtually unanimous after it happened that it was an infinitely better organization. That when the House of Delegates met and decided, it wasn't just the bar association, the state bar deciding, it was really the entirety of the legal profession in New York, because it had representatives from bars and that represented thousands of people that may not even have been members of our association. So that change to the House, I think, was a significant one certainly in the governing and policymaking of the association, and it expanded the things that we look at. We oftentimes get reports and recommendations and resolutions from other bars, and it ends up being, a especially comprehensive and inclusive body.
So now let's focus on a different institution, the role of the president. So, in your purview, and particularly, you have an interesting purview because not only you're a past president, but you're also the general counsel for the association. How has the role of the association's president evolved over the decades?
Well, I've been looking at this, right? We're coming up on our 150th anniversary. I'm looking a little bit at where we came from. And if you look at the presidents that we had, in the first part of our history, they were truly legal giants of the profession in the state of New York. And not to take anything away from, recent leaders, including myself, but these individuals were U.S. senators, governors. One ran for United States president and lost a very close race, and then the next year became president of the New York State Bar Association. Judges, either before or after becoming judges, they were really legal luminaries that were recognized, nationally for their work. I'm going to say that continued, right? In New York State, we used to have the Court of Appeals was elected up until the mid 70s. Mm. And so sometimes you would see individuals wanting to raise their profile because they perhaps had a contemplation of seeking elected position on the Court of Appeals. That changed in the 70s when the law changed about selection of judges on the Court of Appeals, where now it's, as you know, a merit selection process. And so that changed a little bit of the dynamic of leaders might be. I'm going to say now leaders are more like bar association focused. It's looked at more, and I'm not saying this is better or worse, right, but from my perspective, the leaders that we have are not necessarily leaders because of what they've done statewide or nationally. They're more leaders because of the commitment they've shown to the association and their vision for our association. So I think the type of person has changed, and I think the vision has changed. And again, hard to say whether that's better or worse. I think it's just a change in circumstance.
No, that's really insightful. I hadn't realized that there had been that dynamic. So thank you for sharing that. So let's.
Sure, yeah, I find it. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, we've had, and even in recent years, we've had tremendous leaders. But when you look back at the history, I mean, many of them, went on to be, great judges, great statespersons, and really set the path for the reputation of this association to be one of greatness and excellence.
It wasn't Grover Cleveland a vice president of the state bar?
He was a vice president from, I think, what's now the 8th district. I don't know if it was the 8th district.
And there was something that didn't happen for him. So then he decided he was going to run for US president. That's a
maybe that was an easier path than the New York State Bar Association.
So now let's shift and talk about your presidency. And in looking back at your presidency, what policies were set during your time that changed the association and continue to impact how we operate today?
Well, there were a couple of things. One is I formed a committee on the New York State Constitution, which was in anticipation of the fact that the voters would be deciding on whether there would be a constitutional convention. And even though we ended up not having that constitutional convention, that committee's work, which was excellent. At the time, the chair of the committee was a young fellow by the name of Hank Greenberg, who later would become president of our association. They did tremendous work and laid the groundwork for some amendments to the Constitution that took place, in the years since. One was the Green Amendment regarding environmental protections, which came out of that committee and eventually went through the legislature and was passed by the voters. And then more recently, the ERA amendment was something that our Committee on the Constitution was also able to comment on. And that just passed in recent years. So that was one. Another program that happened during my term was an emphasis on law schools. Obviously, I think just about every president in recent memory has focused on membership. And we know where our new members are coming from. They're coming from law schools. And so I had a pilot program that every student in New York State Law School, at least the 15 law schools in New York, could be a member of the association for free. It was a great success, and that's been expanded now, and it's become permanent for all of the accredited law schools in the country. And now it's a permanent feature, which I think is a good one. One thing that is also coming up now again, which came up during my term, was support for a vigorous New York law portion of the bar exam. At the time, we had a completely New York-centric bar exam. When I was president, the chief judge was contemplating moving to the uniform bar exam, the UBE, which we currently have. And the Bar Association and myself, on behalf of the Bar Association, advocated vigorously for a strong portion of the bar exam related to New York state law. And now, currently, we're faced with changing the bar exam again to the next gen bar exam. And again, our association is advocating for a very strong and rigorous testing of New York law.
Yeah, I've heard that there have been some concerns raised about the new law students or new graduates just don't have as much of a grasp on the law, and the exam is very easy, right? They just download some document and they can basically just learn it for the exam. You don't even really have to ingest it in the way that you and I had to when we had to take the bar. So that is definitely.
Certainly. I mean, that's the case when we're talking about the New York portion, right? The New York portion used to be a full day exam about New York law. And now it's, I think, just a couple of hours, and it's a multiple choice, open book, which, in New York laws are anything but uniform as compared to the rest of the country. And so if you're going to practice in New York, you really should have an understanding of the nuances of New York law.
Yeah. New York practice was a lot of rules. I remember having to remember.
Sure.
So.
There's a couple other things. I don't want to take too much time, but one thing that was important during my term that I tried to focus on, that I know we continue to do, is a closer relationship with our New York State Bar Foundation. When it was formed, there was a very close relationship, simpatico, with our association. Over time, the Bar Foundation, found that it could do many good things, and including help our state bar, but help other organizations as well. And during my term, I tried very hard to work closely with the Bar Foundation on some things. Right. I, along with the then president of the Bar Foundation, John Gross, we formed the first uh, committee that was made up of appointees of both the association and the foundation to look at how both organizations can better focus on addressing causes related to access to justice. And I thought that was, I think, an innovative approach, and I think a very positive reflection on both organizations. And I know since that time, our presidents have continued to try to have a close relationship with our Bar Foundation. So certainly very proud of the work of our foundation as well.
Okay. Well, now let's look to the future, since we've looked to the past and looked in the recent present. So looking ahead, what are two things you think the association should do to uphold its mission and adapt to the changing landscape of the legal profession?
So I'm going to go back to our history again, right? Some of the things that's fascinating to me is that some of the same issues that we're talking about today, the issues that we're debating in the House today, are the same issues that our association was faced with 150 years ago when it started. When we started, there was a debate as to where we should be involved. Should we be taking positions on all sorts of things, or should we be taking positions on things that affect judges and courts and lawyers directly? And as you know, Taa, as chair of the House, we continue with that debate today. And so going forward, I believe that the association currently and historically has had great respect from the legislature and Congress and the reports that we've produced, because they've been balanced and nonpartisan. And I think the most important thing we can do is to go forward when we have task forces and committees and reports that are approved by the House, that they continue to be balanced and nonpartisan. And I think that provides our reports with a tremendous amount of credence and weight, and we have much more influence. And, obviously you see people in the House of Delegates when we're making decisions, everyone has their own personal views and influences. But when we come at the end of the day, there's a great respect for the collective wisdom of the House and the collective wisdom of our association. And I think it's incumbent upon our leaders to make sure that when we create task forces and when we bring reports to the House, that they're, like I said, balanced and thoughtful and nonpartisan. And I think that's of crucial importance to the future of the association. Did you say two things, right? So the other thing, again, was right in our history. Why are we here? And what are we going to do for our members? And I think it's crucial for us going forward to address the practice needs of our members. I've served as a leader, as president of this association, and now, as you noted, I'm general counsel. I see that sometimes what makes people want to be a leader of our association is a little different than what makes people want to be a member of our association. And I think it's incumbent upon our leadership to make sure that we're addressing the needs of our members. They want to help their practice. They need their legal education. They want to expand their network for their professional life. Right. And those are the things that I think the association going forward to be successful needs to focus on.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your insights and that little walk down history. It was really informative. And I think we'll capture some of that historical context because it's important to show we've been influential and will continue to be influential. All right. We have a very storied history that we need to share. So thank you. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you, Taya. My pleasure.